A story of mountain solitude, unexpected companionship, and a heart rekindled by wild mischief. Silas, MacAllister, a man whose 68 years had been spent almost entirely amidst the towering sentinels of pine and fir, was a living legend within the confines of Glacier National Park. For over 40 years, he had been a park ranger, his weathered face as craggy and expressive as the mountains he patrolled. Now, in his semi-retirement, he chose to live in a rustic, isolated cabin deep within a less frequented valley, miles from the nearest paved road. His life was a symphony of quiet routines, mornings spent brewing coffee over a crackling fire, afternoons hiking familiar trails to check on wildlife, evenings reading by the flickering light of a gas lamp. He was a guardian of the wild, a silent observer of its grandeur, and a man who found profound peace in its vast, untamed heart. Since his wife, Clara, passed a decade ago, the wilderness had become his most constant and most forgiving companion. He often mused that the mountains held more comfort than any human conversation, their silence echoing the quiet strength he now relied upon. His cabin, built by his own hands from local timber, was a testament to his practical nature and his deep connection to the environment. Every plank, every nail, every pane of glass held a memory. The scent of pine resin and wood smoke was perpetually in the air, mingling with the earthy smell of damp forest floor. A well-worn rocking chair by the stone fireplace, a collection of meticulously organized field guides, and a battered old basset hound named Old Duke, who was almost as creaky as Mac himself, completed his world. Duke, with his perpetually sad eyes and long, drooping ears, was Mac's shadow, content to follow his master on slow, deliberate patrols, his keen nose a valuable asset in tracking and observation. Their days unfolded in a meditative rhythm, a quiet communion with the ancient forest that surrounded them. Mac knew bears. He had encountered them hundreds of times throughout his career, grizzlies, black bears, sows with cubs. He respected their power, understood their instincts, and knew the paramount importance of maintaining a respectful, safe distance. Bears were wild, unpredictable, and best left to their own devices. He had seen the damage they could inflict, and he had spent years educating hikers on bear safety, emphasizing the need to never habituate them. His cabin was meticulously bear-proofed, every food item secured in airtight containers, every window and door reinforced. He rarely had issues, as his presence, though solitary, was a constant, known part of the ecosystem, and the bears largely avoided him. It was a late spring afternoon, the last vestiges of snow melting from the higher peaks, sending swollen streams rushing through the valleys. Mac was meticulously carving a small wooden owl on his porch, the scent of fresh wood shavings mingling with the crisp mountain air. Duke was dozing peacefully by his feet, occasionally letting out a soft snore. The familiar sounds of the forest, the chirping of unseen birds, the rustle of squirrels in the dry leaves, the distant roar of a waterfall, created a soothing backdrop. Then, a new sound, utterly out of place, fractured the tranquility. It was a high-pitched, indignant waahhh. Woof. Huff, followed by a distinct thud and a rapid scurry. Mac froze, his carving knife suspended in midair. Duke's ears perked up, his head tilting, a low, inquisitive whine rumbling in his chest. Mac slowly rose, his senses instantly on high alert, scanning the dense thicket of huckleberry bushes at the edge of his clearing. There, partially obscured by the thick, vibrant green leaves, was a small, dark shape. It was a bear cub. Impossibly small, no bigger than a well-fed house cat, its fur a glossy black, its eyes wide and startled. It had clearly tumbled out of the bushes, perhaps chasing a butterfly or merely tripping over its own clumsy paws. It let out another series of outraged huffs. Snorts. Mrof, sounds that were less a threat and more a dramatic monologue of its predicament, as it struggled to right itself amongst the tangled branches. It seemed utterly alone, no large soul in sight, and its vocalizations were extraordinary, a stream of indignant, expressive sounds that defied the quiet caution typical of cubs. Mac, a man of rigid protocol and deep respect for the wild, knew the rules. Do not approach. Do not feed. Observe from a distance. Call wildlife services. But as he watched the cub, its small body trembling slightly with either indignation or hunger, he saw something else in its bright, intelligent eyes, a profound, almost innocent curiosity, and a surprisingly comical, almost theatrical, outrage at its own clumsiness. It was a tiny, fuzzy embodiment of pure, unadulterated dramatic flair. The cub struggled free, then took a tentative step forward, then another, its gaze fixed on Mac with an astonishing lack of fear, its little nose twitching, clearly drawn by the comforting smell of wood smoke and coffee emanating from the cabin. It let out a soft, questioning mrof, as if asking for an explanation for its sudden tumble. Duke, surprisingly, let out a soft, low arf, and slowly wagged his tail, his sad eyes fixed on the tiny creature. Well, I'll be, Mac muttered, a rare, unbidden smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. This was no ordinary cub. This was a blabbermouth in the making. He knew he should retreat, call it in, but something in the cub's expressive face, its dramatic pronouncements, held him rooted to the spot. It took another tentative step, then sat down with a thud, its little head cocked, as if waiting for a response. Mac cleared his throat. "All right, little one," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Lost your way, have you?" The cub immediately responded with a series of quick huffs. Huffs. Mrof, as if explaining its entire, tragic backstory of being abandoned or simply getting lost during an epic adventure. It was so utterly ridiculous, so utterly charming, that Mac felt a genuine, deep chuckle erupt from his chest, a sound that had been a stranger to his cabin since Clara's passing. Old Duke, startled by Mac's laughter, thumped his tail on the porch, then let out a happy, warbling woo-woo-woo. He knew the cub was vulnerable, too small to be alone for long. He had no intention of interfering beyond what was strictly necessary for its survival until proper wildlife authorities could arrive. His old, cranky satellite phone was notoriously unreliable deep in the valley, but he would try again later. For now, the cub looked hungry. Very hungry. He had no bear-specific food, but he did have some dried berries and nuts, a part of his emergency rations for long patrols. Carefully, slowly, he tossed a small handful of dried blueberries a few feet from the cub. The cub eyed them suspiciously, then sniffed them, then let out a delighted AMRROOWFF, and pounced on them, devouring them with gusto, pausing only to let out a deeply satisfied, rumbling purr, a sound that vibrated through its tiny body. Over the next few days, the cub, whom Mac provisionally named Pippin for her small size and mischievous spirit, became a surprisingly vocal and energetic fixture in his life. She was always talking, a continuous stream of chirps, huffs, whines, and indignant growls. A soft mrope whenever she found something new or confusing, like her reflection in a window pane. An exasperated huff snort when she stumbled over her own paws or a particularly stubborn root. A contented, rumbling purr growl that vibrated through her tiny body when she was fed or curled up in a sunbeam. She was a furry, four-legged commentator on the world, a constant, endearing narrator of her own clumsy adventures. Mac, a ranger through and through, maintained a careful distance, adhering strictly to park protocols despite his growing affection. He left food, berries, nuts, occasional small fish he caught, in designated spots away from the cabin, ensuring Pippin associated foraging with the forest, not with him directly. But Pippin was clever. She'd watch him from the thicket, then emerge with a triumphant whoof after he retreated, as if accepting a challenge. She quickly established a routine of playing near his cabin, engaging old Duke in comical, sprawling wrestling matches that were more gentle nuzzles than true fights. Duke, for his part, seemed rejuvenated by the cub's presence, his tail now wagging almost constantly, his low barks surprisingly playful. The sounds of the cabin, once so quiet they amplified Mac's solitude, now echoed with Pippin's theatrical pronouncements and the playful barks of Duke. Mac found himself laughing more freely, a deep, resonant sound that felt alien and wonderful in his chest. He would narrate his own day to Pippin as he worked, explaining the intricacies of trail maintenance or the life cycle of a pine beetle, and Pippin would respond with her varied vocalizations, as if in deep agreement or thoughtful contemplation. His old, worn field journals, once filled with detached observations of wildlife, now contained delightful, often humorous, sketches of Pippin's antics, Pippin attempting, with great determination, to help him chop firewood by batting at flying wood chips with indignant huffs, Pippin talking to a perpetually confused squirrel perched on a branch, a long, rambling monologue of purrs and growls that sent the tiny rodent chattering in bewildered retreat, Pippin trying to fish from the stream by clumsily swatting at the water, then looking up with wide, innocent eyes and a questioning mrow, as if asking why the fish weren't cooperating. These drawings, crude but infused with unexpected humor and a deep, burgeoning affection, reflected a profound shift within his own grizzled spirit, a thawing of a heart he believed was frozen solid by grief. Weeks passed, turning into a month. Mac's satellite phone, temperamental at the best of times, remained stubbornly dead, making it impossible to contact the park's wildlife division. The remote location and recent heavy rains had caused localized rockslides, further isolating his valley. He worried constantly about Pippin's future. She was growing, but still too young to be truly independent, and no sign of her mother had emerged. He continued his careful feeding, supplementing her diet with protein bars and dried fruit from his own dwindling supplies, always maintaining the necessary distance. He began to introduce her to different foraging spots further from the cabin, hoping to rewild her instincts. He would lead her, at a distance, to patches of ripe berries, or show her how to dig for grubs, narrating his actions with a soft, encouraging tone. "See, Pippin? The good stuff is here. You gotta dig for it." And Pippin would respond with an excited umrof, as she imitated him, often burying her face in the dirt with a comical snort. One afternoon, a small floatplane, an unexpected anomaly in his usually quiet airspace, finally managed to land on the remote lake in his valley. It was Liam, Mac's grandnephew, a former bush pilot, who had finally been able to get through after weeks of trying. Liam stepped out, his face etched with worry, but it quickly transformed into utter astonishment as he saw a small black cub playfully nipping at old Duke's ears by the cabin. "Uncle Mac! What in the blazes, is that a bear cub?" Liam exclaimed, his jaw dropping. Mac, with a rare, mischievous twinkle in his eye, simply said, "Liam, meet Pippin. She's decided my cabin is a temporary resort. And she has quite the vocabulary." Liam, initially cautious, quickly became utterly captivated by Pippin's antics, pulling out his phone to record her expressive sounds and playful tumbles. He spent hours observing her, mesmerized by her constant vocalizations. "I've never heard a bear cub talk so much." Liam chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. "She's like a furry little opera singer." Liam promised to use his plane's radio, a more powerful and reliable model, to immediately contact the park's Central Wildlife Rehabilitation Unit. He explained the situation, emphasizing Pippin's unique vocalizations and playful nature. The park's chief wildlife biologist, Dr. Anya Sharma, a no-nonsense woman known for her strict adherence to rehabilitation protocols, listened with a mixture of professional skepticism and burgeoning curiosity. "A talking bear cub, Ranger MacAllister?" she asked dryly over the crackling radio, a hint of suppressed amusement in her voice. "This isn't a Disney movie. But the duration of her being orphaned and her age, that's concerning. The roads are still impassable for vehicles, but we can arrange for a specialized helicopter extraction in a few days, weather permitting. No human contact. No food from your hand. Keep her wild, Mac, you know the rules." Mac reiterated his careful protocols, assuring her he understood the importance of rewilding. He also mentioned Pippin's constant purring, a detail that clearly intrigued Dr. Sharma, who promised to bring a veterinary team. While waiting for the helicopter, Mac found himself in a delicate dance. He wanted Pippin to remain as wild as possible, but also ensure her survival. He took her on longer, foraging expeditions deeper into the forest, guiding her to prime berry patches and overturned logs teeming with grubs. He built a rudimentary den-like structure for her near the cabin, trying to make it appealing, hoping she'd naturally gravitate towards it instead of the porch. One evening, a larger, more aggressive male bear, drawn by the scent of the fish Mac had left out for Pippin, lumbered into the clearing. Pippin, still small, let out a terrified mrof and instinctively scurried behind Mac, pressing herself against his leg. Mac, ever the seasoned ranger, stood his ground, making himself large, shouting and clapping, successfully driving the male bear away. Pippin, trembling, then looked up at him and let out a soft, rumbling, purr growl, nudging his hand with her head, a clear gesture of profound trust and gratitude, a silent acknowledgement of his protection. In that moment, the lines between wild and domestic blurred, and Mac knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in his bones, that saving this tiny, vocal creature had irrevocably changed him. His heart, which had been a fortress against grief, now held a deep, tender connection that transcended all logic and protocol. The day the specialized helicopter, a sleek machine with the Park Service emblem, finally descended into his clearing was a day of profound, bittersweet emotion. Dr. Sharma and her team disembarked, efficient and professional. Dr. Sharma, a pragmatic woman, spent an hour observing Pippin from a safe distance, utterly captivated by her unusual vocalizations and relentlessly playful personality, particularly her interactions with old Duke, who whined softly as Pippin tried to chew his ear. "Ranger MacAllister, you weren't exaggerating," Elena said, a rare, genuine smile touching her lips as Pippin performed a particularly clumsy pounce on a startled beetle. "She's quite the character. And remarkably healthy, considering her initial state. Her purring, that's truly unique for a cub. We'll need to study that closely." The team then efficiently set up a humane trap, a large, sturdy cage baited with the irresistible allure of fresh salmon and a dollop of wild mountain honey. Mac watched, his heart aching with a familiar pang of loss that felt surprisingly similar to Clara's departure, A profound sense of emptiness opening within him as Pippin, lured by the potent scent, ambled into the trap with an almost childlike curiosity, her small nose twitching. She let out a surprised, slightly indignant mrof as the heavy metal door clanged shut, the sound echoing through the quiet valley, a final, poignant punctuation mark on their brief, extraordinary time together. As Dr. Sharma efficiently prepared the cub for transport back to the rehabilitation center, Pippin, now secured but still vocal, turned her head, her luminous brown eyes meeting Max from within the cage. She let out a soft, mournful purr, a sound that seemed to hold a world of confusion, a question, and perhaps a tender, unspoken farewell, a final plea for understanding. Mac felt a familiar, sharp sting of tears prick his eyes, blurring the image of the cub he had grown to love with a fierce, protective tenderness he hadn't known he still possessed. "You'll be safe, little one," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, ignoring Dr. Sharma's cautionary glance. "You'll be wild again. And strong. That's where you belong, little Pippin. Go on, be free. Thrive." Old Duke sat beside him, letting out a soft, mournful whine, as if understanding the unspoken goodbye. The thought of her reclaiming her wild destiny was a comfort, a necessary truth, but the ache of her departure was undeniable, a physical weight in his chest. The cabin felt utterly empty, profoundly, unnervingly quiet, after the drone of the helicopter faded into the distance, its sound swallowed by the vastness of the mountains, carrying Pippin away. The silence, once a cherished comfort, a protective balm for his grief, now felt heavy, oppressive, filled with the insistent echoes of unspoken purrs and growls, the absence of her clumsy tumbling, the lack of her curious nudges, her exasperated huffs. Mac wandered restlessly through the living quarters, his boots making unfamiliar, hollow sounds on the wooden floor, each step amplifying the quiet. He found himself instinctively listening for the familiar chuffs and huffs, for the small thump of her play, his heart aching with the profound absence of that tiny, vibrant presence. Old Duke, too, seemed lost, wandering the cabin, sniffing at spots where Pippin used to play, then collapsing with a sigh. The laughter, which Pippin had so effortlessly coaxed from him, a sound he had thought gone forever, had gone out of his days, leaving a vast, echoing void. The silence of his grief, which Pippin had so effectively, so joyfully, banished, began its slow, insidious creep back into the quiet, shadowed corners of his life, threatening to overwhelm him once more. But then, his gaze fell upon his old, worn field journals, open on his desk. Not on the routine entries, but on the new pages filled with whimsical, goofy sketches of Pippin's antics. Pippin chasing dust motes in a sunbeam, her tiny paws batting at the floating specks, Pippin helping him untangle a fishing net with playful bites, making the task utterly impossible but infinitely more joyful, Pippin talking to her reflection in a polished brass lamp, head cocked, as if engaged in a profound debate. Each one was a vivid, joyful reminder of laughter and pure, unadulterated happiness. He picked up the small, perfectly smooth river stone Pippin had left on his workbench, its coolness a tangible, comforting link to that brief, magical time. He remembered the surprising warmth of the cub's soft fur against his chest, the unexpected weight of its small head against his hand during a rare, unguarded moment of weakness, the boundless energy and pure, unadulterated joy it had brought into his otherwise solitary existence. Pippin had not just been a rescued animal, she had been a profound catalyst, a tiny, vocal force of nature that had, without conscious effort, broken through the formidable walls Mac had so meticulously built around his heart after Clara's passing. She had retaught him how to feel, how to laugh, how to connect, not just with her, but with the world again, with himself. She had gently, persistently, nudged him back into the current of life. A few months later, as winter's first chill began to paint the mountain peaks with the stark white of frost and the air grew sharper, carrying the scent of pine and approaching snow, Dr. Sharma called again, the satellite signal surprisingly clear this time, a welcome voice from the world beyond his isolated valley. "Pippin's thriving, Ranger MacAllister. She's gained significant weight, her foraging behaviors are excellent, and she's bonded incredibly well with the other cub, Jasper, a male orphan shortly after her. And yes," Elena added with a chuckle, "she still purrs a blue streak, though mostly to herself now when she's content, a very unusual trait. Her vocalizations have become less constant, more nuanced, as she interacts with Jasper and prepares for true wild living. We're planning her release next spring, with Jasper, deep in a remote part of the national forest, miles from any human presence, a place where she'll have minimal interaction with people. She's truly ready for her wild life." Mac felt a surge of overwhelming relief, a deep gratitude for her survival and a sense of pride in her progress, followed by a familiar, lingering pang of longing, but it was tempered by a new understanding. "Will she remember?" he asked, almost to himself, the question a whisper of hope and longing that felt foolish even as he uttered it, but it had to be asked. Elena paused, a compassionate silence on the line, sensing the raw emotion behind his question. "Animals remember kindness, Elias. In their own way. And they carry their experiences with them. They learn lessons that shape them, just as we do." Spring arrived, vibrant and riotous, bursting forth with new life and the boundless promise of renewal. The hillsides bloomed with wild flowers, the air filled with the scent of damp earth and new growth. The distant roar of waterfalls seemed softer, a harmonious background hum. Mac, now more connected to the subtle rhythms of the wilderness than ever before, his senses sharpened, often hiked to a high, secluded bluff overlooking the vast, emerald expanse of the national forest, miles inland from his cabin. It was a place where he could see without being seen, miles from the designated release site, a silent vigil maintained from a respectful distance. He never saw the actual release, an event conducted with utmost discretion and secrecy by the Park Service, protecting the animals from human interference, allowing them the purest, untainted return to wildness. But he imagined it with vivid clarity, Pippin, robust and strong, her sleek black coat gleaming in the spring sun, bounding into the wild with Jasper beside her, perhaps letting out a final, triumphant mrof, as she embraced her freedom, her true home, her wild destiny, a triumphant return to the wilderness that was her birthright. He pictured her purring with contentment as she found a patch of ripe berries, or growling playfully at her new companion, a truly wild bear living the life she was meant to live. In the years that gently folded into one another, Silas MacAllister continued his quiet life in his cabin, diligently patrolling his section of the park, a faithful sentinel of the wild. But it was no longer a life defined solely by solitude or grief. It was a life profoundly infused with the vibrant, indelible memory of a purring bear cub, a life inextricably connected to the vibrant, pulsing heart of the wilderness in a way he had never fully experienced before. His cabin, once a mere dwelling and a place of duty, felt like a living, breathing part of the forest, a place where human and wild intersected in surprising, beautiful ways, a beacon not just for hikers, but for his own reawakened soul. His old field journals, once filled with the detached, empirical observations of a ranger, now contained lyrical prose and delightful sketches, each one a testament to the profound lessons he had learned from a tiny, vocal grizzly, a testament to the unexpected capacity for connection that lay dormant within him, a tender awakening. He still walked the familiar forest paths with old Duke trotting contentedly by his side, his gait perhaps a little slower, his back a bit more stooped with age, but now he listened more intently, his ears attuned not just for the familiar sounds of the forest, the rustle of leaves, the calls of birds, but for the elusive, cherished echoes of a certain growl or an indignant humph, carried on the wind, a sound only he might hear, a secret symphony that played only for him. And sometimes, when he was out on a remote section of trail, deep in the untouched wilderness, his mind quiet and open to the natural world, his senses keenly aware of every detail, he would find a small, perfectly smooth river stone placed neatly on a moss-covered log, its coolness surprisingly inviting against his weathered hand, as if left just for him. Or a single, unusually large and sweet huckleberry, plump and glistening, left on a piece of fallen bark, its dark luster a stark contrast against the rough wood. He never saw the giver. The vast wilderness remained seemingly empty, offering no visual confirmation, no tangible proof, only the persistent, comforting echoes of a memory that felt impossibly real, a connection that defied all logic. But he would smile, a deep, genuine smile that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners, a smile born of profound gratitude, a renewed sense of wonder, and a quiet understanding of the universe's intricate, often hidden, connections. He would then let out a soft, knowing mrof into the silent, ancient forest, a whispered greeting to a friend unseen, a promise kept across the divide between human and wild. His heart, once quieted by the profound weight of grief, burdened by loss, now hummed with the vibrant, enduring melody of an unexpected friendship, a profound, almost mystical connection to the wild, and the joyful, indelible memory of a rescue bear cub who never, truly never, stopped purring. His life, once defined by loss and the quiet endurance of sorrow, had been beautifully, irrevocably reborn through the goofy antics and the silent, profound wisdom of a tiny, vocal bear. He was no longer just Silas MacAllister, the retired park ranger, he was a guardian of a secret, a recipient of wild grace, his spirit forever intertwined with the untamed beauty of Glacier National Park, his quiet cabin now echoing not just with memories, but with the profound, joyful light of his own reawakened soul. He lived on, surrounded by the majestic mountains and the whisper of the pines, his heart full, knowing that in saving a life, he had truly, gloriously found his own.